Thank you everyone for joining us today for the Plan and Design Your XR app. Before I introduce our speaker, I have a few quick things to go over. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We ask that you be kind and respectful to everybody, including our speaker. We want the reactor to be a place everyone feels welcome. Please ask questions using the live YouTube chat. Today's session was pre-recorded, but April is here live to take your questions at the end. In the chat, I'll also be sharing some links that go along with today's content, as well as our Reactor Meetup page and some MR sites if you are interested in checking those out. Today's session will be added to the Reactor YouTube page in 24 to 48 hours. And finally, near the end, I will share a link to our survey. If you have a few minutes, we greatly appreciate your feedback. I will now start the session. And then, as I said, April will be here at the end to take your questions live.
Hello everyone, my name is April Spate and thank you for joining us today for our Microsoft Reactor session. I lead the Spatial Computing Cloud Advocacy team here at Microsoft, and we've partnered up with the Mixed Reality team as well as the Microsoft Reactor to bring you all a 10-part series on a journey into XR development. For the last session, we covered a lay of the land. I presented you all with paths into XR development. I shared some hardware, as well as some SDKs, some frameworks, some platforms that you can also build on and get started with. For this session, we're going to discuss planning for your app. I'm really excited about this because if you are at this stage in your journey, then great, you have an idea that you want to bring to life. However, if you aren't quite sure what that is, don't worry, I can hopefully help you get to a point where you know what it is that you want to create. As I shared for the last session, do keep in mind that everything that I'm going to share today is not an exhaustive list of all the different possibilities and opportunities that you can pursue. So with that said, I highly encourage that you explore as much as you can beyond just attending this session. Also, I brought my notes along with me as well, just to ensure that I don't leave out any fun details for you all, because there's so much to cover when we're talking about XR development. So without further ado, let's talk about planning your app. Okay, so we're going to first start off with, what is your idea for an app? If you already have an idea for an app, then just hold tight. I'm going to get to you in just a moment. But for those of you who are still trying to figure out what it is that you want to create, cool. I am here to hopefully bring some clarity to mind and to provide you with some sources of inspiration and things to think about as you're wondering what is it that you should create. So first and foremost, what is a real world problem that you want to solve? That may be a route for you to take as you're thinking through what it is that you can create. I shared this during the Q&A for the last session. I'm going to share it again right now. A perfect example. During a recent event that I attended, a student had created a virtual chemistry lab, and the purpose in doing so was that it provided a means for school systems to save money on having to purchase all the chemistry equipment that's needed for students to learn how to do the various things in a chem lab. So that's a real world problem that you can resolve. There are plenty of more options available as well, but if you're thinking of what exactly is a real world problem, that is something that you can consider. Another is, what is something fun that you'd like to be able to do? So when you're creating apps and experiences, especially if it's your first one, it doesn't have to be something that's life-changing. It can just be something fun or silly. Perfect example, there's filters for various social media platforms. Recently, I came across one that turns you into a Pixar character, and I thought it was cute. You can do things like that as well for your very first project. And so the next thing you might be wondering is, well, where can I find sources of inspiration? Good question. There are a variety of places where you can find inspiration, including existing apps. So what I would suggest that you do is check out different apps in various app stores. The Microsoft Store, for example, has apps that people have created that you can draw inspiration from. The Oculus Quest Store also has apps. Steam VR also has apps. Pretty much go wherever you can download an app and just browse the catalog, and hopefully that'll help you with thinking of what is it that you can create. In addition to that, check out what's on social media. Every so often, people share what they're creating on Twitter, for example, and it's a nice place to go find something that might be okay and fun worth trying out. And you never really know quite where inspiration will strike. I was participating in an event not too long ago where one of the presenters was doing a demo on different interactions that can be done, and the most random thing happened. I had saw that they had an object float to the ceiling, and all of a sudden that made me think to myself, wouldn't that be cool to have like an AR birthday celebration? Whereas if someone were to open up a virtual box, as soon as they do that, there's balloons everywhere, they're on the ceiling, there's a birthday cake that appears somewhere on a flat surface. Things like that are great examples of apps that you can create. There's no wrong particular type of app that you can start out with. So just be flexible with your brain and really just check out what exists that's out there. Now, if you already have your own idea, then great. Hopefully, to some extent, what I've shared hopefully overlaps with the steps you've taken to think of what is it that you wanted to create. So next up is choosing your reality. If you missed out on the last session, that's totally cool, but I did get definitions of augmented reality and virtual reality. I'm going to give you those definitions again so that way you're caught up to speed. Augmented reality, also referred to as AR, is going to enable you to see the real world around you while displaying virtual or digital objects on top. And then with virtual reality, that's going to be when you're fully immersed in a virtual environment. You cannot see the real world around you. You can only see what's happening within the headset that you're wearing directly through the lens that's in there. So that's AR and then VR. Now, as it relates to your app, you got to choose which direction you want to head in. Although, yes, there are some apps that cover both AR and VR. Starting out, I will say try to aim for one, and then from there you can expand to others. So let's think about it for a second. For augmented reality, do you want the person that's trying out your app to need to be able to see the real world around them? If so, AR is going to be the route you want to head down. As for VR, is it the case that you want the person using your app or experience to be fully immersed and not able to see what's happening in the real world? Then VR is going to be your choice. With each reality, there are some device limitations to keep in mind. So with augmented reality, you're going to be a bit more flexible in devices that can be used. So for example, you can use mobile devices. You're also going to be able to use smart glasses as well. And you can also use what are referred to as head-mounted devices, or HMDs. Those are going to be devices that you can literally put onto your head, and they can try out the experiences in that manner. Perfect example will be like a HoloLens or even like a Magic Leap 1. As for virtual reality, you're going to need a VR headset. And so those particular headsets, you're not going to be able to see what's happening around you. Perfect examples are the Oculus Quest, for example, or the Quest 2. There's other options that are available out there as well. I did present in the last session that there is a mobile option if you want to do VR, but that will require specific hardware, or not hardware necessarily, a specific type of app on your mobile device to actually render things for VR, if you will. And so therefore, I would say you're likely going to be creating an app where someone's going to need a VR headset, so a VR head-mounted device, if you will. And so therefore, think about that as you are trying to decide whether you want to create for augmented reality or virtual reality. Now, the next thing I want you to think about is choosing your distribution. So how is it that people will be able to actually access your app or experience and try it out? So I narrowed it down to two options pretty much. Either one, you can place it into an app store. And so that's either it's free or it costs to use it. You can go into an app store. The thing about putting apps in app stores is that depending on the platform that you are putting the app onto, there are going to be guidelines that need to be met, and those guidelines can be very strict. It's not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing because it does ensure that people who are trying out the app have a positive experience. It also ensures that they're comfortable with trying the experience as well, which is very important when you're doing things for like VR as well. Plus also making sure that things are going to be built accessibly in addition to that. So if you're going the App Store route, do check out the guidelines for the respective platform to see what's required for submitting apps. It's just like submitting mobile apps to app stores. There's things that have to be met. There's a team at whatever platform company that reviews apps that are being submitted. You have to follow the guidelines or they will reject it. Now, on the other end, you can manually distribute your app. And if you're taking that route, then folks are going to be able to side load, which is when they're going to manually install the app onto their device. And so that's also a decent option as well. But what you do want to be careful for is that if people are side loading an app that you've given them, so essentially it's a file that you're giving them, there needs to be a level of trust there at play because they want to ensure that they're not installing malicious um, software onto their own devices that can eventually corrupt their device, and that's not something that you want to have happen. So keep that in mind if you're going the side loading route. Not to mention, they also have to know how to do that. With that said, those are going to be the options. There's also the ability to make it, let's say, open source if you want to distribute it in that manner, and then people can then take the option of manually installing it on their device. In either case, if you are going to do that, put your app on a place like GitHub, for example, or somewhere that can better handle large files because these files are likely going to be significantly large. And so therefore keep that in mind. Next up, I have some considerations that I want you to be thinking about as you're planning out your app. The first one up is going to be interactions. So the way that people will interact with your app can significantly impact your input design. Input design being the various forms of input that can be used to interact with your app. Now for AR and VR, there are a variety of ways that people can interact with apps, which is good, but you also want to ensure that you're using the proper interaction model. So for example, you can interact with your hands directly. You can interact with eye tracking, head tracking, voice is another good example as well. And so with that said, oh, also controllers, forgot about controllers. So with that said, think about what makes most sense for your app. And that's, like I said, going to be very important to your input design. Now, the next thing is going to be whether the app needs access to a camera, a microphone, and a location. First and foremost, if anything today, I want you to remember you should not be creating apps that do not ask for permission before accessing someone's camera, mic, or location. It is a very bad thing if you do not ask for permission up front. With that said, you can create apps that do utilize camera, app, and mic, but you have to ask people for permission. With that said, if they decline the ability to actually give permission to access either of those three, think about how that might impact the actual overall functionality and interactivity of the app, all right? Now, where might this be something that's helpful? So let's say for your camera, if you're doing like a face filter, you kind of need a camera in order to track someone's face in order to apply the filter on top of it. Next is going to be, let's say you have an app that's doing real-time translation, whereas someone speaks into the app and then the output is going to be a translated text that they see in AR. That's going to require permission to use a microphone because you need to be able to access that person's microphone so that way you can take whatever their utterance is, put it into whatever way you're doing to do the translation, and then output something. Another example, let's say for location, let's say you're doing an app that is going to be a virtual tour guide, let's say also in virtual reality. So if they go to whatever location, they're able to start the app experience up, and then now there's some virtual tour guide giving a tour of the area. Well, for something like that, it's going to be location-based, so therefore you need to know where the person is actually located. So that's where knowing or having access to location is going to be important. So as a reminder, if you are creating an app that utilizes camera, microphone, or location, you need to get permission from the person that's trying the app. Those three things fall within personal identifiable information, also known as PII. And you'd be amazed at how much information you can learn about a person by having the littlest bit of access from them. You do not want to create that app that ends up in a bad news story about how you're stealing people's information, all right? Next, we have for AR apps. Is your app going to be location-based, or you can use it anywhere? So I gave the tour guide example just a moment ago, whereas depending on where you are, a tour guide appears and gives you a virtual tour. An app like that is going to be location based. It's going to require that you or that the person trying the app or experience is physically in a location. Other examples might be e-commerce apps, if there happens to be in-store apps that people can try out on their phone. Whereas there's going to be non-location based, so use it anywhere apps, if you will, where it doesn't really matter where you're located. You can try out the app regardless of where you are. And just today, for example, I had tried out, I believe it's called Polycam, where you can create 3D models of whatever in your real world space. I don't have to be anywhere particular to try that out. I can just exist wherever and give that a try. So that one's not going to require your location in order to actually use the app. So that's just a few more things with regards to location. You also want to be aware of the fact that if you are doing a location-based app, think about whether the environment will ever change. What would definitely be unfortunate is that if you were to create, let's say, this tour guide app, I'm going to keep using that example, and everything's set up and it's perfect, but now there's a new building that's being constructed, for example. How does that impact your app? Does it impact your app? And if it does, what is it that you're going to be able to do to account for that later in the future? So location-based apps, there's definitely things you want to consider even further, but they're actually really good apps as well because it can enhance someone's experience when they are physically at a location. The next consideration that I have is going to be environment, specifically lighting as well as size. So starting off with lighting, I want you to think about how much light is going to be necessary for folks to actually interact with the app. Perfect example for augmented reality, you're going to want to be in a well-lit space. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to render whatever your app is doing here in the real world. Whereas for virtual reality, you want to think about, as someone's immersed in the app, how much of a role does lighting play into that? Whether things need to be brighter for them to actually see things in the app. Good example, when I was working on an app a couple years ago for a hackathon, and it was for children, and at one point we had wanted to switch scenes in the app from one scene to another. And so the initial thought was, okay, we'll just make everything go black and then we'll bring everything back up for the next scene. While at first that may have seemed like a good idea, it actually wasn't. Why is that? Well, they're children. And this is for very young children. It was a therapy app that we were creating. What you don't want to run into is instances where now this child is placed into this very dark space where there's nothing around them. And children are typically going to be afraid of the dark. So therefore, light in that situation played a really big role. We didn't want to necessarily have them all of a sudden in a dark place where they couldn't see anything. Not to mention they were going to be immersed in just nothingness. So for something like that, white as a background was a better option. But you want to think about things like that as well. Now, as for size, so do you need a lot of space or a little bit of space? For something like augmented reality, that can honestly vary as well. If you think about apps like Pokemon Go, for example, that app takes place across various spaces, if you will. So you might need a bit more room for folks to travel and go around. For something like virtual reality, how much space will someone need to actually interact with the app, especially if they're trying this app out while they're going to be tethered or connected into a computer or a game console, because then they're going to be very limited on the space that they have. Now, unless you have the ample room in wherever you're doing VR to travel about without having to do different forms of teleportation and such, and you can just walk about in the real world, then you're going to be confined to a smaller space. Therefore, think about how that might impact the person that's trying out your app. Now, next up happened to be my favorite, which is going to be models. There's a very small, rare chance that the app you're creating won't need 3D models. But for all those other apps, you are going to need 3D models. And I've narrowed down to one or two ways to approach this. Either one, you can create the models, or two, you can buy the models. Now, if you're creating the models on your own, then cool, great. You're going to need design skills if you don't know what that entails. There's platforms available such as Blender as well as Maya. You can also use some of the newer platforms that are available, such as the reality capture, which is something that Apple provides. There's also an app I tried earlier today and I mentioned it, which is, I believe it's Polycam, where you can actually use your iPhone, if you have LiDAR, to create 3D models and import them into various different 3D modeling software. So there are definitely options for folks who are going to be more pro versus folks who just want a nice simple model that they can import into something. You can also have a freelancer create a model, so that's going to be more in the buy realm of things. You can also ask a friend to create a model as well. Now, if you're going to go the buy route, what you will need to ensure that you do is that you license the model. There are a variety of different places where you can find models, and I'll share one in a second. But what you need to make sure you do is read the fine print. Not all models online can just be used freely in whatever format you want to use them in. There are different licenses that exist, and they exist for a reason, because when people create these models, it is their personal intellectual property, and in some cases, they might be selling it. They may request certain credit if you're using it in your app. In either case, you want to ensure that if you are using models that you physically did not create from scratch, you have the appropriate license for that. So read the fine print on the site so you can learn more about what that entails. Now, where can you even go find some? So Unity Asset Store, they have models. They also have free ones as well, but they do have paid ones that the community contributes. Sketchfab is another place, Turbo Squid, and then also CG Trader. So you can go find some there. There is a GitHub repo or two that I've come across in the past where there are also free models that you can use. So there's a variety of different places. Honestly, everyone, what I tend to do is search into the browser free whatever model that I'm looking for. Or if I just want to go the paid route, I'll just search for whatever 3D model. That's been the easiest way for me to find them. If you do want to go the create route, I will say design is definitely a fabulous path to consider if you are getting into XR development. Although that's not quite development, it is designing 3D models, and that is just as important because people need models in their experiences. The final thing I'm going to touch upon is something that is very near and dear to my heart, which is going to be accessibility. There's so many different avenues that we can travel down today for accessibility. However, I'm going to narrow down to just three, but although I'm only covering those three, that doesn't mean that those three are the only most important ones. There are three that I wanted to make sure that I really touched upon while here today. So the first one's going to be interactions. Please do not rely solely on just motion control or voice navigation for your apps. So what does that mean? You should not create apps where the only way people can interact is using a controller of some sort. Why is that? Well, it may be the case that someone using your app may not be able to physically hold a controller. So if that were to occur, then what? How are they going to interact with your app? Therefore, you want to ensure that you're providing different options. Same with voice. If someone cannot speak, you need to provide another way for them to interact with the app. And also ensuring that whatever you're creating is compatible with accessible gamepads. There are a variety of accessible controllers and gamepads that exist today. So if you don't know what an accessible gamepad is, I really want you to spend some time learning more about accessible gamepads and accessible controllers. Those are going to be really helpful for folks who have disabilities and they're unable to physically use what you may identify as a standard controller for games. They make a world of a difference, and so ensure that as you are embarking on this developer journey, that you know what's available and how you can incorporate that into the apps that you're creating. The next thing that I have up with regards to accessibility is going to be visual. So you want to ensure that your app is going to be inclusive to blind or visually impaired people. With that said, be very mindful of the colors that you may be using, the lighting that you may be using as well in your app. Having immersive sound effects, audio descriptions, and text and image magnification is going to be really helpful. So like you would expect if you're on the web, honestly, try to incorporate those principles into the app that you're designing. It will make a world of a difference. And as I mentioned again, appropriate color choice and contrast ratios. There are some apps where you can adjust those things once you actually are in the app itself. So that's really helpful for people. And I want you to be thinking about that too. And the final accessibility touch point that I want to make is on audio. So being able to provide any sort of transcripts or closed captioning is going to be very helpful for people who are deaf or, like myself, hard of hearing. It will make a world of a difference. And also the ability to adjust the volume, caption controls with a keyboard of some sort, screen readers or assistive technology. You want to ensure that whatever you're creating is going to be compatible with those as well. There's one other thing I'm going to sneak in here, which is having apps that can be either seated or standing. So whatever you're creating, make sure that it can be available for use by folks who are either seated or standing. Why is that? Not everyone can physically stand. Therefore, for folks who are unable to physically stand, you want to ensure that your app is being inclusive of them as well and have a seated mode. Okay? Now, as always, I have a resource for you, Berkeley Universal Design for Learning. They have a section on XR accessibility. Oh my goodness, it is fabulous. There's a lot in there that you can check out. I would suggest taking a look at that. I want you to check it out. There's a lot of information in there, so much more than what I can cover today. Okay, so let's discuss storyboarding and the process flow for your app. So storyboarding, for those of you who may be into movies or TV shows, not reality shows, but actual TV shows that are scripted, even though reality shows can probably be scripted, they follow what is known as a storyboard. And the storyboard literally tells a story from start to end. As for your process flow, it's going to be pretty much similar. It's going to have a start point and it's going to be an end point. Now, between the start and end, there can be various different paths that can be taken. I want you to think about those various paths. For those of you who are developers or even might be new to development, we really love what is known as the happy path. The happy path is a path that we think everyone should and will take when they try out our app. The reality is we are human. Therefore, not everyone's going to take that happy path. Therefore, create your happy path first, which is a path that you intend for people to go on as they're trying out the app. And then from there, start thinking about, well, where may things venture and veer off? The way you can uncover this is one, having your own brainstorming sessions, two, sharing your ideas with someone else. If you have a prototype available, have them try it out and see how they naturally react given whatever in the app, given the instructions that's in the app, or maybe if there's no instructions, just see what people actually do with the app. And that's going to give you an idea of how you can account for the various paths that people will go on. So there's two more things I want to cover. The first one's going to be platforms for creating. If you checked out my last session, then you have an idea of all the different places where you can start with creating. If you're new here, that's fine, because guess what? I'm going to run down that list again for you. You can either go the low code, no code route, or you can go the code route. If you want to go low code, no code, that's not going to require you to do really any coding or very minimal coding. I think it's going to be more beginner friendly, but you don't have to be a beginner to take that route, honestly. In either case, some options that I have for you, especially if you're doing AR, is going to be Adobe Aero. There's Reality Composer from Apple. There's Spark AR as well. There's Power Apps. There's also Lens Studio from Snap. And those are going to be your low code, no code options. Then if you're doing AR, VR development using code, then you can use engines such as Unity. There's also Unreal Engine. There's StereoKit from us here at Microsoft, Babylon JS as well, and then aframe. So those are going to be some potential options. Granted, there are a lot more available, but those are some to start you off with. Depending on where you are right now as you're thinking through your app, that may very well have a significant impact on what platform you pursue for creating your app. So when it comes to where you want to create this, again, getting an idea of which reality and interactivity and things of that nature, that is going to impact what platform you're using for creating. The final thing that I have for you all is going to be just scoping your MVP. So your MVP is going to be your most viable product. That's going to be what you put out into the world as a very first iteration of your app. MVPs are great because, first and foremost, it is a starting point for something that you will hopefully iterate on later down the road. Now, with MVPs, once you have an idea of what the MVP entails, that is going to be the scope of your MVP. Anything outside of that scope, you should honestly not be working on just for the MVP. And over time, you're going to learn more while you're creating this app. There's going to be wonderful, fabulous things that come to mind that you're going to learn about and come across, and that's great. However, I encourage you, any new ideas that pop up after you started building your app, assuming you've already created your scope for the MVP, save those things for like phase two. Don't all of a sudden rework the entire app now to incorporate that one feature, unless you're at a complete blocker of finishing the app because this one feature is not there. Save it for phase two. Otherwise, you're going to end up never putting that app out into the world because you're going to keep adding things. So really concentrate on whatever the scope of your MVP is. You will be able to add more later. Trust me, you will be able to add more. And you might even realize that that one thing you really had to have, you probably don't want it anymore after you get an MVP done. So that is all that I have for you today on planning your app. I know that's a lot, and hopefully when you first joined, you started in one place, and now that we're done, you're like, you know what, there's a lot I need to think about. Of course, you could always just naturally open up an editor and have fun with it, but I really want you to be thinking about these things that I shared today because there's a lot of planning that goes into creating apps, especially for AR and VR. In any case, thank you all for joining today. We have another wonderful session coming up in 2 weeks. I look forward to having you all join me for that particular session. And until then, have fun creating, and I will chat with you all later.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here with you all. This time I've been keeping up with the chat, so I am prepared to answer some of the questions that I've seen. Again, my name is April Spate, and I work within our cloud advocacy group here at Microsoft. We focus on spatial computing, and we partner with the mixed reality team, and lucky for us this year, as well with the Microsoft Reactor. So, as I am going through the chat, let's see. I see there was a conversation around creating 3D objects. I know I had mentioned, if I'm not sure if I actually mentioned in this particular video, I know the last one I mentioned it. Apple Object Capture also is another option that you can utilize to create 3D models from actual objects that you have in your real world. So like these little pair of shoes that I have, I can take a picture of it and at different angles and it'll create the model. So that's an example if you want to create something that already exists in the real world and you want to create a model of it. I did mention Polycam. That just happens to have been one of the apps I downloaded that day. I know someone asked my opinion on it. Um, I would say it's a decent option. Compared to something like object capture, where you would need to take multiple pictures at different angles, whereas with Polycam, if I'm not mistaken, I think you have that option, but you can also just move your camera around kind of like you're taking like a video feed of it. So it's a matter of which of the two you are up for. I would say the only thing with object capture, Apple Object Capture, is the fact that you are going to need an iOS device in order to actually use it. So the iOS device being an iPhone or an iPad, and I believe there are some specifications for your actual computer, so your Mac as well. But I do have a tweet that I put on Twitter long, long ago of something that I had made. And if I happen to find it while we're still here, I'll drop a link into the chat so that way you all can get an idea of the outcome from my very first time trying it out. It's not the most beautiful example. I had made a model of Data from the Goonies. I happen to have a little Data Funko Pop, and oh, found it. I'm going to drop that into the chat. Let me get the link just so you can get an idea more so of what to expect if you gave that a try. 1 second, let me just grab that link for everyone. And if the lovely folks from the reactor can share that in the chat, I appreciate it. All right, so let's see what else do we have here. Let's see. There was a question with regards to UX process flow. So I know I didn't get really into like super detail about that in the recording I did. However, what I do have is a link to our documentation that we have at Microsoft that does cover UX when you are designing your apps. I would suggest taking a browsing through that to learn a bit more. I know it's kind of hard to go into detail given our time that we have, but I would say browse through that. And if the lovely folks from the reactor can share that in the chat too, much appreciated. With regards to low code, no code, thank you, Anil, for answering the question of the list of low code for collect IT by diversity. So I will also share that the next episode that we're doing in February is all about low code, no code. So I am doing a bit more of a deeper dive into exploring different platforms that you could utilize. There is going to be a guide through using Microsoft Power Apps. That's one of the platforms that we have here at Microsoft that you can use to create mixed reality apps. And it is going to be drag and drop. So when that event is available to sign up, I would suggest checking that out if you want to know more about low code, no code. And we're only 3 episodes in well, in February, we'll only be 3 episodes in. We have 10 episodes total. So therefore, there will be more topics coming, but I can assure you the next one is all about low code, no code. Let's see. So there's a question with regards to Carnegie. Thank you for liking my costume change. But there's a question here regards to any way to review the first one from Jabani. So on the mixed reality or the Microsoft Developer YouTube channel, we do have a playlist of mixed reality videos, and I'm going to share that as well in the chat. If the mixed reality folks can share that one too. That's where you can go find the recordings after the events, and not even just the recordings for this particular for not just for this particular episode series, but really a lot of all the videos that's improper grammar. A lot of the videos that we record for different mixed reality events, and so I would always suggest maybe bookmarking that link. It's aka.ms/mr-videos, and that's where we post the videos that we have. And you may also encounter some other videos from the past events that we've done. If you are one of the people here that wants to know a bit, to learn a bit more about some advanced topics in mixed reality, then that playlist also has some other topics that go that are likely better for like that next level if you've already been doing this for a bit. But in either case, check out that particular YouTube playlist. Let's see. So what do I use as a tool for storyboarding AR, VR app interactions? So I would honestly say, Anil, for me, whenever I'm designing anything that I share, it's always just a simple prototype. And by simple, it's really just to show certain features that's available with the mixed reality toolkit, which happens to be the toolkit that I personally primarily use. When I'm designing it, I just like to sketch things out. I know it's not necessarily an actual legitimate like tool to use, but that works for me. We also have, I haven't done much with it, but there's also MRTK available for Figma as well. I just haven't explored it, but I just personally keep things relatively low level, and I just sketch everything in like GoodNote. With regards to Dan, what frameworks will still work with HoloLens 1? I would say if you are doing anything for HoloLens 1, when I do scripting in Unity, I'm using .NET, but ooh, I haven't done anything with HoloLens 1 in a while, so I might not be the best person to answer that particular question. So sorry about that if that's not that helpful. Let's see. So someone had asked too much information. I haven't watched the first one. Where can I find it? Is it possible? So yes, as I shared, make sure you check out that link that was shared for the videos. Let's see, date for low code, no code. So that's going to be February 10th. We will update the Meetup page with the next episode. So join the group if you haven't already. And that's where you'll be able to know or get emails when new events are happening. Let's see. Collected by Diversity. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Miss going to the Reactor office and connecting with everyone there. So shout out to Joe and Nick. Yes, I personally have only been to the San Fran and the Redmond reactors. And I would say Joe and Nick are two people I really like working with. With Nick and with Stereo Kit, I know in the first episode I mentioned Stereo Kit a bit more. We did work on some some videos together to provide a guide on how to utilize StereoKit. And so StereoKit's going to be a really great option if you want to code locally with Visual Studio. And so in that same playlist that I mentioned, that's where you can find those videos if you want to check out StereoKit. So what would be the process I would suggest for scoping a good MVP from Benjamin? So I would say personally, first of all, starting off with what it is, what is the end goal that you are let me see, how do I say this? Like, what is it that you actually want to create? Once you know what it is that you want to create, then from there, I would start thinking about what is the basic functionality that needs to exist in that particular app. And then also, it's a matter of let me back up a little bit. Sorry about that. What it is that you want to create, get an idea if you want it to be AR, VR. If it's going to be both, that's fine. I would always say if you're brand new starting out, choose one reality. Thanks to OpenXR, of course, you can port to more than one. But I would say decide whether it's AR, VR. And then from there, once you have an idea of the reality that you're going to use, that's when you can start going through the steps of what it is that's actually happening in the app. It's kind of hard for me to give you a direct answer given that that response may differ for someone that's doing like storytelling in VR, for example, versus someone that's creating like a face filter, for example, in AR. So it really depends on what the app is. If you happen to have an idea that you want to try to fully flesh out how to go about an MVP and you need some help, just let me know. I am on LinkedIn, can help you out with that as well. If you want to just brainstorm some stuff. But when you're doing your MVP, I would say try to keep things as to the point where you can get the functionality across for the app. There's some particular features that may be a little bit too deep in the weeds that you can probably leave out for an MVP, but if it's not core to the actual app being able to function, then I would say you can probably save those for the next iteration that you do. But so long as you're able to get the basics of the app working, I think that's where you should pretty much scope down for the MVP. I know me personally, every time I come up with a bright idea for an app, I always think big. And then as I'm starting to go through planning and I'm starting to look into how I can go about implementing it, I start scoping down a lot because I realize it'll take forever to build something. And the projects that I create, they're relatively simple and quick. So I try to keep it a little shorter. But just really think about what it is you want to do, whatever that basic functionality is that you need. That's where I would say to start with. Let's see. So Giovanni wanted to know, will people be able to do things in there, such as playing the piano or paint within the app you build? I'm not sure which app exactly you're referring to, so I will do my best to answer this question. If you are referring to doing something, let's say in VR, for example, then if this is specifically with regards to, I'm trying to think timing wise, I did see your question earlier. If this is around when you're doing things, making your app accessible, then yes, they will be able to do things like play a piano, for example. It really depends on how you go about implementing that interaction. The same with painting. Again, it's going to be relative to how your app is created. I know this is probably one example to consider. With HoloLens, we have head tracking, for example. So you can use like head gaze. So if someone's unable to use their hands to interact, then depending on how you create the app, it may be the case that as they move their head, that's how they're able to actually paint in the world. Or that's how you'll know which particular key on the keyboard they're pressing. Same for if they're trying to choose paint colors as well. The HoloLens has eye tracking, for example. So if you are getting an idea of the eye gaze, if they happen to have their eyes on a particular like paint color, if you will, for more than like 3 seconds, then that can indicate that they chose that color. And then from there, however way you want to simulate them being able to paint, that's how they can start that process. So that's top of my head examples on the spot to answer that. But that's how you could do those sort of features in an app. Let's see, any ideas from Chris West? Any ideas for code examples, specifically on buttons and MRTK? Looking for deep dives on coding functionality for MRTK controls. So for MRTK, if you're looking for code examples, we do have oh my goodness, I'm blanking right now. It is part of the Mixed Reality Toolkit package. Oh my goodness. It's one of the hubs in there where you can try out all the different features that are in there. Let me see if I can find it really quick for you all, and I'll give you a link. But that particular package, there's once you open that up, there's just different examples in there that you can try out. And because you'll be in Unity as this particular example, or Unreal, you can see how everything is set up. There's also the MRTK documentation. So it's the example scenes that you can go to. Let me put this link in the chat for you all of how you can get to that. Let's see. So, escape button. All right, so if we can share that link in the chat, thank you. I would say start there. Let's see. I've also tried it for VR as well with the Oculus Quest. And so long as your not computer, oh my goodness, so long as your environment is configured for Oculus Quest and you import the Mixed Reality Toolkit, you are able to actually try those things out in VR as well, those same features. So let's see. Is there a valid alternative to aframe for AR on both iOS and Android devices? If you have not tried Babylon JS, I would say give that a try. Unlike aframe, where it's going to be HTML, with Babylon JS, it'll be JavaScript. And the folks that work with Babylon JS are here at Microsoft. They're very lovely people. So I would say give that a try. I'll link you to the documentation if you so you can access that. Let me see. Okay, let's see. So it's a question from Anil that I'm sorry, I probably won't be the best person to answer this right now, but what do you say the state of WebXR is, and is that something that will be big going forward? So I would say for me personally, I actually don't do a lot with the web. That's something that I'm starting to get into a bit more. However, I do think that it's something worth pursuing and trying out. The reason being is that um, it's a good option for folks who don't want to learn how to use an engine. For people who want to work more to do their coding locally. So the learning curve is going to be a little less steep, and that's why I think it's going to be a more accessible option for people. So I would say it's worth trying out. I know it's something that my team is doing a bit more with as well this year. But like I said, I'm probably don't have the best answer there, but that would be my opinion. Um, Let's see. Nicholas says, I think I saw a demo by Microsoft of a VR room created for HoloLens 2 to meet and share info models and see avatar. Is this possible in AR for HoloLens 2? So that sort of functionality is something that you may be able to get an idea of what that's like from the announcements that we've made last year around like Microsoft Mesh, for example. I would say just follow along with what the mixed reality team has going on as there's more announcements around that. So you can get an idea of when you'll be able to use that sort of functionality for yourself with augmented reality, or specifically with the HoloLens 2. That's just as much as I can share about that right now. Um, so Rajesh said, I'm looking to create a development environment for AR. Can you suggest a reasonable starting point for hardware? Hardware, are you referring to a actual device that you're going to deploy things to, or are you referring to your computer? That answer is definitely going to vary, I would say. If it's AR and device, if it's more of like a headset that you would like for someone to actually wear, I will be biased and say I definitely support using HoloLens, but if it's something that can be used for like a mobile device, that's always a good option as well. When it comes to that, it's really a matter of whether you want to go Android or iOS. And I personally can only attest to doing things with iOS. I'm starting to do some this year with Android, but I will say there are limitations to doing things with iOS, just given that you're going to need to use Xcode. And so, if you plan to build and deploy your device, especially if you're using like a Unity, you're going to need Xcode, and Xcode isn't going to be available on Windows. You're going to need iOS for that. So that's going to be one thing to consider. For something like Android, I know with Unity you can create and deploy to Android regardless of whether you're on Windows or on iOS. So that's something to consider too. If you're referring to your actual computer, I will say for augmented reality, I can only really go off what I personally have. I happen to have an Alienware computer, but that's also just given that I flip and flop between AR and VR. I know you're doing more things with VR. You're going to want something that has a pretty good, uh, uh, my goodness, I'm blanking right now. But it's kind of hard for me to answer if it's a computer, but for device itself, you have a bit more options. Let's see. So Microsoft video demo from Nicholas says included a VR piano to use on HoloLens 2. The vid is available online of some of the capabilities. So yes, Nicholas, that is correct. And we also do include that example in our example scene as well, if anyone's interested in giving that a try on how they can play the piano. And then if I can find it, we also have another example. Let me see if I can find that for you all. We have our lovely intern from last year. She created a tutorial on building a piano in WebXR using Babylon JS. So if anyone wants to give that a try, I'll provide the link in the chat as well. And you'll be able to deploy that to VR if you want to check that out. Let's see. So what is an ideal from Haggai? I'm hoping I pronounced your name correctly. Hardware workstation configuration for development for HoloLens 2. So we have documentation on what we suggest you have for HoloLens 2 development. And I'm going to grab the link for you right now. I would say start there. I think we have some specs on here. If Let me give you that link. Okay, so I just provided that link. So Horace asks, when using augmented reality, do I need to consider permissions when displaying a digital item in an environment such as a museum, library, or a retail location? That is a very good question. And that is something that I personally don't have the answer to. Hmm. I would say it wouldn't hurt to inquire with someone that's there. So let's say that you're creating something for, let's say I'm here in LA. So let's say I was creating something for LACMA, which is one of the museums here. I would honestly reach out to ask, just given that they probably want to be aware that these digital things exist in their particular space. And also what you don't want to have happen, not saying that anyone here would do this because we're all ethical beings. You don't want to have anything like malicious in this like public space and then that particular space isn't aware that something is there. That would not be good. So I would say inquire with the facility, if you will, or the retail location or the library, so that way you don't run into any issues later down the road. Um, so Giovanni asks, what are the business models going to be inside VR app development? Would I be able to charge monthly memberships, etc.? How about crypto? Will this play a role? So Giovanni, it depends on where you are, where your app is located. If you have it in something like an app store, I'm going to use Oculus as an example. For something like that, you can charge people to utilize your app. If you're looking for something more of a monthly membership, that's when I would say whatever platform that you're providing access to your app, that's where you can look into how you can go about monetizing the app itself. I think that's going to be dependent on where your app is distributed and how people can access it. Um, so Rajesh, yes, you said device to deploy to. So yeah, if you're going for AR, you can have your mobile devices. I did forget to mention also there's smart glasses. I did talk about them a little bit in the last episode. That's options. I know that there's spectacles that's available. There's Ray-Ban stories, but probably something of that nature, just in real light as well, if you're looking to do things with AR. So whether you want to go mobile device such as a phone or a tablet or smart glasses, those are some options. I didn't answer Giovanni's question around the crypto. Sorry about that. I am not deep in the weeds on crypto related things, unfortunately. So I'm not the best person to answer that particular question. Fernando asks, are there any official channels to continue these conversations and get in touch with the XR community like a Discord server? So we do have a Microsoft tech community for mixed reality where you can engage in conversations there. There are various Discord servers that I have heard of that's available for these discussions. And I do have a thread on Twitter that I had inquired how people are keeping up with the community. That's going to take me a while to find that thread. But within that thread, a lot of people did put their links to different communities could that people could join. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to find it fast enough. Sorry about that. But what I will do on LinkedIn, I'll share a link, and then also on Twitter, I will also share a link as well. Let's see. Um, So Swati wants to know on will there be any meeting on how to build an XR device, not just an XR app? So if you are curious as to how to build hardware, unfortunately, that's not going to be covered in this particular series. this series is going to focus more on development and then like low code, no code as well. And so in later episodes, we'll actually get into some actual coding. I have a sense that some of you do want to see some coding as well, but I will get into that a bit later down the road. Let's see what else I have here. Chris West did provide some suggestions with regards to HoloLens 2 workstation. So I would say check that out. Let's see. Collect IP by diversity. When you say please list the names again, I am hoping you're referring to AR devices. If so, those are going to be in real light. I'll provide it for you all into the chat. There's in real light, snap spectacles, and then there's Snapchat stories as well. Spectacles. I cannot spell spectacles. All right. There we go. I just pasted it in the chat. Yes, my LinkedIn. I guess I should share if I mentioned that. I'm going to put something on there. So I'm going to give that to you all now. I just started being more active on there, so do bear with me. But I will be sharing more on there. I'm going to review the last final questions, and then we're going to log off for today. Let's see. So Giovanni, I just shared my LinkedIn. Let's see. Okay, so with regards to Mary Smith inquired about building VR worlds in AltSpace VR, what are the plans for integrations into XR, if any? So I don't have any updates from the AltSpace VR team at the moment to share. If I do happen to learn of any that I can share, I will share then. But right now, I don't necessarily have any updates to share at the moment. Does Microsoft from Horus, does Microsoft offer resources, a publisher for games? I'm drawing this idea from a fictional source, but it left me with understanding that one could approach large companies with ideas. That is a good question, Horace. I would have to check whether we do have any particular resources. We do have an individual that I can reach out to. Horace, if you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and then I'll check internally on our side to see if we have any particular resources that I can share with you. And then Funny Videos inquired on how to build a VR device, not just a VR app. So again, we won't cover device building here. It'll be more so related for apps. All right, so we are at 10:03 here in sunny California, and I am going to come to a close for this particular episode. I shared today how you can reach out to connect with me on both LinkedIn. I'm going to share my Twitter as well for those of you who may be interested in connecting there. Feel free to send me messages, ask any questions that you may have, or just to come say hi as well. I like hearing hi from people. Again, next episode, we're going to focus on low code, no code. And then within upcoming episodes, we will get into some actual coding. Personally, I do more coding rather than low code, no code, but I think low code, no code is always a good option as well for creating apps. So definitely join our Meetup group, and we'll announce episodes as they come. And I hope you all enjoy this and found this to be very helpful.
Thank you so much, April. That was awesome. Thanks for everyone for joining us today, and hopefully we will see you on February 10th for the next episode. Have a great day, everyone.